So recently I've been on a bit of a tirade. It feels as though over the last couple of months I've been campaigning really hard against Kotoamatsukami. Basically I've been battling against the idea that Kotoamatsukami is as powerful as everyone believes it to be, as I'm of the opinion that Kotoamatsukami, while a powerful genjutsu, is far from the most powerful genjutsu in all of Naruto. I believe that we've seen comparable levels of genjutsu used without the ridiculous cooldown that we see with Kotoamatsukami. There's also the fact that we see people like Mifune broken out of Kotoamatsukami as if it was just a regular genjutsu. However, when you campaign against something, claiming that something that a lot of people believe to be is the strongest thing in Naruto as far as genjutsu go, a lot of people are gonna come to you with their contrary opinions. And while I'm usually not one for buckling or yielding, shout out to Erwin, I got a very interesting email this morning. One that made me genuinely rethink on everything that we think we know about Kotoamatsukami. An email that just might have changed my opinion about the so-called strongest genjutsu in the Naruto universe. But before we get to changing my very stubborn ways, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. While you're at it, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto theories, I talk about theories from every anime. If you really like hearing me talk about anime, go ahead and follow my brand new podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. So, the Kotoamatsukami, the legendary genjutsu used by Shisui and whoever's holding on to his eyes at the moment. The genjutsu that allows you to brainwash anybody without even making eye contact with them. The genjutsu that changes your entire personality without you even knowing. A genjutsu that can topple entire nations in one look. For a long time, I've been underselling the power of the Kotoamatsukami, because as far as we understand, the Kotoamatsukami, when used, has a 10-year cooldown, meaning that the likes of Shisui could only use it maybe 15, 16 times in his life, as he has two eyes, both of which wielded Kotoamatsukami. Outside of the fact that its cooldown is atrocious, there's also the fact that after being placed under Kotoamatsukami, your chakra network appears disturbed, which means that anybody who can feel or see chakra networks can see that you're under genjutsu and snap you out of it very easily. Because of these two facts, I've long discounted Kotoamatsukami as anything but the strongest genjutsu in Naruto. But honestly, I might have been wrong. Listen, if we're only taking into consideration the things that we know about Kotoamatsukami, I am absolutely right. Which, like, you know, what else is new? But if hypothetically the theory that I was emailed today is correct, then I'm willing to admit I would probably be wrong. See, in order to delve into this theory that I was sent today, we're gonna have to talk briefly about how Sharingan operate. Specifically, how Mangekyo Sharingan operate. We know that Uchiha clansmen, when put through a large amount of emotions, be that fear, hatred, or love in the case of Sarada, awaken their Sharingan. And while in the majority of circumstances, these Sharingan awake as a one-tome Sharingan, that's not actually always the case. Some Uchiha awake their Sharingan straight to two-tome or three-tome, though these cases are extraordinarily rare. But since we're talking about the Uchiha as a whole, let's talk about the one-tome example. To work your way up through the tomes simply requires practice. As an Uchiha clansman becomes more practiced with their respective Sharingan and goes through more emotional toil, their Sharingan will slowly but surely evolve from a one-tome to a three-tome. And as an Uchiha clansman evolves from a one-tome to a three-tome, their Sharingan gains new abilities. But the Sharingan doesn't gain new abilities. Let me explain. You see, technically a one-tome Sharingan and a three-tome Sharingan are no different. From a second that a user of the Sharingan awakens a one-tome Sharingan, they have access to all of the abilities they'll have with a three-tome Sharingan. The ability to track chakra, the ability to sense movements, the ability to copy and memorize both ninjutsu and taijutsu attacks of their opponents, and so on and so forth. However, as a Sharingan wielder works from one tome to three tome, these abilities become refined. So the tomes in a Sharingan aren't representative of new abilities being added to the user of the Sharingan wielder, but instead a physical demonstration of how far into the mastery of those techniques that individual user is. However, this isn't the case for the next step in the Sharingan's evolution. Because after a wielder of the Sharingan awakens a three-tome Sharingan, the only further step they can take is a Mangekyo Sharingan. And unfortunately, the only way to achieve a Mangekyo Sharingan is to kill your best friend. Whether that be actually stabbing them to death or setting them up into a circumstance where they end up dead, like with Shisui. Upon awakening a Mangekyo Sharingan, the wielder gains new abilities. And what's always felt weird about the Mangekyo Sharingan, especially in the circumstance of Shisui, is that for every other single Mangekyo Sharingan wielder, both of the eyes have had different abilities. Even in the case of Obito, who got Kamui in both of his eyes, his Kamuis worked in separate ways, with one of his Kamuis being able to Kamui things outside of his body into the Kamui dimension, and the other Kamui being able to Kamui parts of his body into the Kamui dimension. And then there's the likes of Sasuke, who was Amaterasu, and Kagutsuchi, also known as Flame Control. And while these two techniques might seem similar, Kagutsuchi allows Sasuke to add shape to his Amaterasu. But truly the best example of this is Itachi, who has Tsukiyomi and Amaterasu, two completely unrelated Sharingan abilities. And yet for the longest time, it's been largely implied that Shisui simply has Kotoamatsukami in both of his eyes. And we actually know that he does have Kotoamatsukami in both of his eyes, because we've seen both of his eyes use Kotoamatsukami, one with Danzo and one with Itachi. But the Kotoamatsukami we saw in both of those circumstances were very different from each other. You see, we all know that the night that Shisui planned to use Kotoamatsukami on Fugaku to change the sentiment in the Uchihas about Konoha and wanting to do the coup, that he met with Danzo before to clear the plan with him. And it was at this point that Danzo and Yoji Aburame and a couple other root members jumped Shisui, and Danzo stole Shisui's eye. Danzo then goes on to transplant that eye into his own face. And the time that we get to see Danzo use Kotoamatsukami is in the 5 Hokage meeting after the Pain Assault arc. See, at this moment, Danzo is operating as the pseudo Hokage, because Tsunade is unconscious, and he's trying to sway the other Hokage into following his lead, pretty much cementing him as the Hokage. And in order to do this, he uses Kotoamatsukami on Mifune. Mifune being the head samurai of the Land of Iron. However, this doesn't work for Danzo, like at all, which, like, wow, so surprising. So many of Danzo's schemes go correctly. Couldn't assassinate Hiruzen, couldn't get rid of the Akatsuki. Hell, you couldn't even train Yamato. But people are theorizing that the reason that this genjutsu didn't go well for Danzo, and the reason that the genjutsu's cooldown was only 3 days for Danzo, is because Danzo stole the wrong eye. See, when Danzo places Mifune under Kotoamatsukami, it changes Mifune's personality. It makes Mifune side with Danzo. And as Mifune is an impartial third party meant to look over the 5 Kage's summit, this could swing a lot of opinions towards Danzo. The only problem is Ao, the right-hand man of the 5th Mizukage, is there, and he has a Byakugan he once stole from a member of the Hyuga clan. Ao senses that Mifune is acting weird and activates his Byakugan. And upon activating his Byakugan, he sees that Mifune's chakra network is disturbed, and therefore that he's under genjutsu. And he traces the source of that disturbance to Danzo. Ao then tells everybody that Danzo has placed Mifune under a genjutsu, and they break Mifune out of the genjutsu like it's just a regular genjutsu. So the theory Ao's emailed asks the question, what if Shisui had 2 different levels of Kotoamatsukami? What if he had a lesser level of Kotoamatsukami in one eye and a greater level in the other with differing cooldown times? This would explain how Danzo minimized the absolutely insane time gap difference between 10 years and 3 days. What if the cooldown for that eye wasn't 10 years to begin with? It was just a couple of days or a couple of weeks. Because let's not forget, Danzo does have an accelerated healing factor because of Hashirama's cell, and therefore it would make sense that his cooldown would be less than that of Shisui's. But to go from 10 years to 3 days is a massive stretch. And honestly, if you think of some of the other feats we've seen from Shisui, this theory makes a lot of sense. You see, basically the only time we ever see Shisui use his own genjutsu is in Itachi's second light novel. It actually might be the first one, I don't remember. But in Itachi's light novels, Itachi and Shisui are sent off to kill a traitorous member of the Anbu known as Mukai Kohinata, because Mukai Kohinata has been selling the secrets of the leaf to other villages. And basically both Itachi and Shisui's plan throughout this entire battle is to put Mukai Kohinata under genjutsu using their Sharingan. However, because Mukai Kohinata is the wielder of one Byakugan, he does have a slightly higher resistance to genjutsu, and therefore neither Shisui nor Itachi can get Mukai Kohinata under genjutsu. And as Mukai Kohinata is holding, I believe, Shisui by the throat, about to kill him, Shisui activates his Mangekyo Sharingan and places Mukai Kohinata under genjutsu using his Mangekyo Sharingan. Now, it's never explicitly stated that Shisui uses Kotoamatsukami here. It's simply stated that he activates his MS and places Mukai Kohinata under genjutsu using his MS. But this scene never really sat right with me, because we've never seen any other user of the Sharingan activate their MS to not use their MS abilities. It's also never been explicitly stated that activating an MS makes whatever genjutsu you're using stronger. I mean, considering the fact that Shisui has the eyes of hypnotism and not the eyes of insight, it's not crazy to assume that activating his MS would make his genjutsu stronger, but the whole thing just felt weird to me. Specifically because if he had used Kotoamatsukami in this circumstance, Shisui's eye should have been closed for 10 years. And considering the fact that they defeated Mukai Kohinata maybe a year to a year and a half before Shisui's death, that would mean Shisui's eye should have very much been closed in his battle against Danzo and every other time we've seen him in the anime. So this theory postulates, what if he did use Kotoamatsukami, but not the Kotoamatsukami with the 10-year cooldown? What if he used the Kotoamatsukami in the eye that Danzo stole? What if he used his lesser Kotoamatsukami to break through the genjutsu resistance of Mukai Kohinata? And I know what you're saying,
well, then at least one of Shisui's eyes would have been closed for a couple of weeks, and I feel as though that would have been noteworthy.
And you're right, maybe one of Shisui's eyes would have closed, except we've never seen Shisui use Kotoamatsukami. The idea that Shisui's eye closes after using Kotoamatsukami is actually derived from Naruto video games, because Shisui never gets a chance to use Kotoamatsukami in either the anime or the manga. What we do know is that after Danzo uses Kotoamatsukami on Mifune at the 5 Kage Summit, before 3 days is up, Mifune in his battle against Sasuke has his Kotoamatsukami eye open. So it brings a pretty logical doubt to the idea that after using Kotoamatsukami, your eye closes, at least in the circumstance of the lesser Kotoamatsukami eye. It's a possibility that another plus of using the lesser Kotoamatsukami eye is that it doesn't close off your eye. It simply puts the ability you were using on cooldown. Take it even one step further than that, when Itachi's crow comes out of Naruto and uses Kotoamatsukami on Itachi's Edo Tensei body, that crow's eye does not close. By the way, we need to talk about that crow at some point. That crow flew around with an activated Sharingan for a decade. It has more chakra than probably anybody else in the show. Not to mention, it technically had enough chakra to activate Kotoamatsukami. And in the anime, Itachi states that Shisui's Mangekyo Sharingan will not reactivate for decades. But the crow's eye simply goes back to a 3-tome, implying that the use of Kotoamatsukami doesn't actually close an eye. It just puts the Mangekyo Sharingan on cooldown. So it gives a lot of credence to the possibility that Shisui used his lesser Kotoamatsukami on Mukai Kohinata, because his eye would simply just deactivate back to its regular Sharingan and he wouldn't be able to use that MS ability for a couple of weeks. Considering the fact that it's the only time we've ever seen Shisui even use Kotoamatsukami, that's not much of a problem. Where the real interest comes in is Shisui's other eye. The eye Danzo didn't steal. The eye that Shisui gave to Itachi. See, Shisui, knowing he had been poisoned by Yoji Aburame and that everybody was going to be looking for his other Kotoamatsukami eye, decided to bequeath it onto Itachi. More specifically, he decided to call a crow down from the sky, shove his eye into its face, and then tell that crow to follow Itachi forever. However, Itachi, knowing that he was dying and wanting to have a backup plan for Sasuke to come back to the leaf, decided to program that Kotoamatsukami to react to his own eyes. And upon making eye contact with his own eyes, the person with his own eyes would be placed under a genjutsu that would make them want to protect the leaf. This I also thought was kind of interesting, because for all intents and purposes, the Kotoamatsukami that Danzo stole and shoved into his face did not require eye contact, because Danzo used it from under his bandages on Mifune. So therefore, why did the crow have to come out of Naruto to react to Itachi's eyes? Well, logically, only the real conclusion to come to here is that that crow needed to make eye contact with Itachi's eyes, meaning that the eye that Shisui gave to Itachi required eye contact to pull off Kotoamatsukami. And after this crow pulls off Kotoamatsukami on Itachi, Itachi tells Naruto all about Kotoamatsukami. And while the conventional cooldown time that's accepted is 10 years, Itachi actually states that it would be decades, plural, before Shisui's MS reactivated. But this cooldown could be accelerated with things like Hashirama's cells. Now, to what degree that acceleration occurs, he never says. Is it 10 years to 3 days? We don't know. What's interesting about this Kotoamatsukami, however, is that Kabuto, for all intents and purposes, isn't actually able to break Itachi out of it. Well, he is and he isn't. Let me explain. So Kabuto was unable to break Itachi out of this Kotoamatsukami in the way that Ao broke Mifune out of the previous Kotoamatsukami used by Danzo, and that is by placing a hand on somebody and injecting chakra into their chakra system to give it a shock to break it out of genjutsu. You know, when somebody places a hand on somebody and says break, that's disturbing their chakra network to break them out of genjutsu. But Kabuto never tries to elect for this option. In his battle against Itachi and Sasuke, he never once tries to get his hand on Itachi and disturb his chakra network. And considering the fact that Kabuto is the genius who was able able to continue moving his body after Tsunade hit him with body pathway derangement and basically orchestrated a large swath of the 4th Great Shinobi World War, I would assume that he would try any option he could to get Itachi back on his side. Especially when considered the fact that Kabuto was trying to put a new control scroll in Itachi's brain to regain control of Itachi. So why would Kabuto have to take those additional steps to gain control of Itachi if you could just break him out of this genjutsu? Probably because he wasn't able to break him out of that genjutsu in the way that Ao was. Now you could make the argument that Ao is incredibly good at dispelling genjutsu because he was also the person who dispelled the genjutsu that Obito placed on Yagura. And that's fair. Honestly, Ao has a long history of dispelling Kotoamatsukami like genjutsus. Kabuto is a genius. The fact that he felt as though he wasn't able to break the Kotoamatsukami on Itachi and figured switching the command scrolls in Itachi's head would be the easiest way to regain control implies to me that there's a different level of severity between these two Kotoamatsukames. So what am I saying here? That Shisui, like every other Sharingan wielder in the history of the Sharingan, when it came down to MS abilities, had two different ones. His weaker Kotoamatsukami, and I put it in quotation marks because it may not actually be weaker, had a significantly shorter cooldown that was shortened even further by Danzo and was also able to be launched without making eye contact. And honestly, I would make the argument that that might be the stronger Kotoamatsukami. A Kotoamatsukami that can be used more than 7 or 8 times in a lifetime. A Kotoamatsukami that can be made while looking at the back of somebody's head. And while you can be broken out of this Kotoamatsukami, it still operates like the stronger Kotoamatsukami, brainwashing somebody without them knowing. So long as you use this genjutsu not surrounded by a bunch of Hyuga or people who can sense chakra networks, you could change the mentality of a public figure or the leader of a village. And sure, maybe one day somebody will get a glimpse of their chakra network and break them out of genjutsu, but look at what happened with Yagura. Not until Ao acquired a Byakugan by defeating a Hyuga clan member and looked at Yagura was it found out that Yagura was under genjutsu for years. By that point, the damage had already been done. The hidden mist was known as the hidden blood mist for decades. And in Shisui's other eye, he had his stronger Kotoamatsukami. A Kotoamatsukami that you cannot be broken out of. A permanent brainwash with a cooldown of possibly decades. This Kotoamatsukami can only be used maximum 7 or 8 times in an entire lifetime. But with the power of this genjutsu, every 10 years, you can change the world. You can make the Hokage a vile and wicked person who takes pleasure in killing those around them. You can make the leader of a militant village docile. And even if hypothetically somebody was able to deduce that they were under genjutsu, they would never be able to break them out of it. And these are the two separate powers of Kotoamatsukami. Listen, I like this theory. I like it a lot, actually. And if this theory were to be true, I have no qualms with calling Kotoamatsukami the most powerful genjutsu technique out there, assuming that the cooldown for Shisui's weaker eye wasn't something stupid like a year. Because having the ability to use Kotoamatsukami on the level that Danzo used it on Mifune occasionally is very powerful. Sure, it's easy to break that person out of genjutsu, but if you don't have a Byakugan or the ability to sense somebody's chakra network, you may never get that chance. So within the confines of Konoha, is this genjutsu not that powerful? Yeah, there's too many Hyugas. But outside of Konoha, this genjutsu is insanely powerful. So what do you guys think? Do you think Kotoamatsukami has 2 separating powers or just the one with a 10-year cooldown in both eyes? Tell me in the comments below, and while you're down there, make a comment on how it's so incredible that Nick actually might be backing up one of his takes. And also while you're down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm still not giving Shisui credit. He didn't do anything while he was alive, or dead for that matter. He didn't get brought back using Edo Tensei, but give it a little more credit to Kotoamatsukami if this theory proves to be correct.